What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where, guess what? We get to take a look at the people who are playing the challenges, who are watching the people playing, watching the people who are watching the people, watching the people playing, watching. You get the idea. We're going to be taking a look at some tournaments from this weekend, the Magic Online challenges, as well as there was a whole bunch of modern regional championships. I believe 4 to be precise. So we're going to be taking a look at a bunch of data from Modern, Standard, and Pioneer. We're going to be putting all of the data together, figuring out what the metagame looks like, the total percentage share of each particular deck list, and then at the very end of each segment, we're going to be taking a look at some deck lists. And this is a very special episode because this is the first week of Avatar being legal on Magic Online. And the first round of data from specifically standard challenges, including Avatar. And let me tell you, it has made a pretty significant impact. But before we go through all of that, a quick word from our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Be sure to use promo code Doom at checkout if you guys want to buy any singles, sealed sleeves, or deck boxes. Cool Stuff Inc. They got cool stuff, and they got it in stock. And with that out of the way, let us go ahead and begin with Modern. So as I mentioned, there were 4 regional championships that took place this past weekend. There was Japan, Las Vegas, Antwerp, and Canada. I believe it was Calgary in Canada. So what's interesting to me is when I was going through and I was trying to find the challenge data from the weekend, I don't know if Magic Online had some issues with uploading challenges or if there just weren't that many challenges that fired, because I was only able to find data from 4 challenges over the weekend, and usually we have 7. So, again, not sure if those challenges just didn't fire or if there was an issue uploading the data from Magic Online to their servers, but 8 total events because we had the 4 RCs and the 4 challenges. And this is what the metagame looks like. Now, what's very interesting to me is, Boros Energy up from last week, 13.8 to 15.6, but it's actually feels like it's a little bit more than that because from the regional championships specifically, Boros Energy had a pretty good weekend. I believe it had one of the best conversion rates. The win rate was reasonably good. I think it was over 50%, and there was a couple of top 8s there from Boros, including a win. So Boros, even though it only increased in metagame share roughly 2%, it actually still had a much, much better weekend than that, because this is also, again, including that MTGO data, so keep that in mind. Jeskai Blink, fantastic weekend. It won 3 of the events. I believe 2 of them were RCs. I believe it won Japan and Canada. The other RCs in Vegas and what was the last one? Antwerp were won by Amulet and Boros. Those were the 4 RC winners there. But Jeskai Blink, fantastic weekend, 14.1%, roughly about the same metagame share. In terms of actual metagame share, the big winners here that I want to talk about, Amulet up a little bit, nothing too crazy. The big one here, Brood Scale up from 2.2 to 4.7, and then Simic Ritual basically not really existent last week, up to 3.9%. So those are 2 of the big winners this weekend. Everything else roughly about the same in terms of just pure metagame share. Again, as far as the win rates are concerned, I believe that the big winners from a win rates perspective were Boros Energy. I think Amulet had a relatively decent win rate. But I think Jeskai Blink actually had a pretty not great win rate as far as the RCs are concerned. I think it was pretty significantly below 50%, if I recall. So these are the winners. That's what the metagame looks like. Again, not a ton of variation, but as far as Avatar cards are concerned, there is quite a few to look at. So let's go ahead and do that. And the first deck list I want to take a look at here is from Varo in 26th place, one of the challenges this weekend. And what's going on here, this deck list actually kind of had a pretty decent showing in the Vegas Regional Championship. I believe it made it all the way to either the semifinals or the finals. And what's going on here is it's sort of affinity adjacent, where you have Urza Saga, Mox Opal, Emery, and then some sort of permission in the form of Rebuke. You have a Saga package with Shadow Spear, Aether Spellbomb, Tormod's Crypt. But instead of playing a little bit more aggressive with things like Pinnacle Emissary and Kappa Cannoneer, you're a lot more interactive. You're playing Unholy Heat and 4 Metallic Rebuke in the main deck, and you also are kind of playing this draw engine with Tamiyo and Quantum Riddler, which Riddler, kind of weird to see in a deck that doesn't feature any copies of Ephemerate or Consigned to Memory, but it's kind of just a good card. And what's nice about Riddler in this deck is you empty your hand pretty fast because you have so many zeros with Amber, Opal, and Bauble. So because you can empty your hand relatively fast, you can turn this into a draw 2 pretty often. And it also works pretty well with Bauble because you can have the Riddler in play, dump your hand, crack Bauble, draw on their turn. Very good Cori-steel cutter deck with all the zeros. And then the new card I wanted to highlight is Soka Bold Boomeranger. This is a 1/1 for 2. When it enters, you can discard 2, then draw that many. And then whenever you cast an artifact or lesson, put a counter on it. So discard before draw, very good with Riddler. Draw 2, very good with Tamiyo. And cast an artifact spell, put a counter, very good with all the zeros and the Emeries. So something to think about if you're into this kind of blue-red, I believe they called it Is It Metalcraft on the Vegas stream. So slightly different take on Affinity if that's what you're into. Like I said, a little bit more interactive, but nonetheless, very, very powerful strategy. Another big winner here from the weekend was Yawgmoth, and this particular list in the hands of DB_Barksec in 4th place in a challenge. The reason there was a lot of talk about Yawgmoth this weekend is the new inclusion of Badgermole Cub. So Badgermole Cub is a 2/2 for 2. I mean, if you haven't seen any Standard, maybe you're not familiar with this card, but it is all over the place in Standard. 2/2 for 2, when it enters, you can Earthbend 1, and whenever you tap a creature for mana, you add an additional green. So there's a couple of things that are really good about Badgermole Cub. So first of all, it makes all of your mana dorks, like Delighted Halfling, and the like, tap for additional green. The other thing that it does is when Earthbend puts a counter on a land and turns it into a creature, which means you have a creature in play with a +1/+1 counter on it. Very powerful with Cauldron. Also, if you happen to have a Halfling under a Cauldron and a Badgermole Cub in play, then all of your creatures that have counters become a Halfling, and then they all make additional green mana with the Badgermole Cub. So, lot to like about the Cub in this deck. It gives you more mana acceleration to curve into Yawgmoth, and it gives you big ballistas. Just a lot to like about it, and again, I think the interaction specifically with the Earthbend land having a counter on it with Agatha's Soul Cauldron is a huge reason why it's so good. But yeah, it just kind of does a lot. 2 bodies as well for the Yawgmoth, including the land that comes back, so you're not even down that many resources if you have to sack the land to the Yawgmoth. Just a lot to like about the Cub, and don't be surprised to see Yawgmoth make a very, very big resurgence in the coming weeks. And speaking of Badgermole Cub, what if we also slot it into the Samwise combo deck? And that is what Claudio has decided to do here, making a 31st place appearance. A lot of what this deck is pretty much the same as the Samwise deck before, with Cauldron Familiar, Viscera Seer, Samwise Gamgee being the main combo engine, where if you sacrifice your Cauldron Familiar to the Viscera Seer, you sack a food to get back the Familiar, that makes a food off Samwise, etc., etc. But we're kind of including Badgermole Cub here because this deck already wants to play a bunch of mana dorks with Halfling and Gilded Goose, and so Badgermole Cub very, very good with those. Other than that, there's not really a ton of other synergy here. It gives you 2 bodies for something like a Birthing Ritual, where if you sacrifice the land because the land has mana value 0, you can still get a 1-drop off of the ritual, and then the land will still come back due to Earthbending. It also gives you a creature to draw off Innocence. This list is playing 4 Company and 4 Birthing Rituals, so a lot of ways to make sure you can find the combo pieces pretty reliably. Eternal Witness to rebuy stuff like Coco. Again, not as much as the previous deck list to do with Badgermole Cub, but mostly just here as kind of another mana accelerant, gives you some extra bodies to sack to Viscera Seer, and then again, more just a boatload of extra mana very, very fast. So another pretty good inclusion for the Badgermole Cub. And I mean, of course, we got to give a shout out to the one, the only Aspiring Spike, who made it all the way to the finals of a Modern challenge with 4 copies of Phoenix Fleet Airship. I've been watching a couple of Spike streams recently, and he's been kind of cooking with the airship in Modern. For those of you who don't know, this is a vehicle that basically makes a copy of itself if you sacrificed a permanent this turn. It's a 4/4 flyer that has crew 1, but more importantly, it says if you've sacrificed a permanent, not creature, not artifact, just any permanent. Well, it turns out it's pretty easy to sacrifice a permanent without having to pay any extra mana in Modern. So you can kind of curve the fetch lands into a clean airship. If you have a 1-drop in play on turn 1, you can go turn 2 Phyrexian Tower, and then you can sacrifice the 1-drop to make 2 mana. That gives you the boost of mana to cast the airship, and then you've also sacrificed the creature to the Phyrexian Tower. And then this deck is sort of just kind of a Splinter Twin deck, right? You're playing the Warren Soul Trader plus Marionette Apprentice plus Gravecrawler combination, so you have ways to race the fast combo decks, but you also have a ton of sort of built-in late-game insurance with the airships and Bailmerks and whatnot. So very, very interesting take on the Soul Trader deck, and I would not be surprised to see the airship show up a little bit more in Modern, because this card has looked very, very powerful in the games where I've seen it. So very, very, very cool card. So that's going to do it for Modern. Let us go ahead and switch over to Pioneer. And this is what we're looking at for the Pioneer format. Now, before I take a look at this graph, because it looks a little strange, I've seen some comments in the YouTube. Surprise, I do read your comments, all of them. And I've seen some people suggesting that we kind of switch the graph to be like the graph on the right-hand side is always, highest percentage to lowest percentage. The reason that we show it like this is it's sort of easier for you to see the comparison of week to week, because, you can look at the place where a certain deck is last week in the metagame compared to this week. So it's sort of the exact same as whatever last week is. Last week, was sorted by highest to lowest. So just something to keep in mind. But as you can see here, Grill Prowess, not really sure what happened. Metagame looked pretty fantastic last week, and then everybody decided, oh, we're just going to play Prowess this week. This is something I sort of expected, because with the hit to the mono-red mice deck in the form of Heartfire Hero, I think a lot of people who were previously playing the mono-red mice deck sort of just transitioned into playing Prowess. But yeah, 28.8%, which is 3 times what it was last week. So I don't really know what else to say about the Prowess deck. I mean, as far as the other decks, Demons went up a little bit, Monument down significantly, Azorius Control, Phoenix down a decent amount. The one big thing that I want to talk about here is Mono Green Devotion. Basically non-existent last week, 7.5%. Now, we're not gonna take a look at a Green Devotion deck, because there is a lot of other more interesting and sweet decks that I wanted to show you guys today. But the big reason, if you didn't already catch on, Badger Mole Cub. All these Green Devotion decks are playing 4 Badger Mole Cubs, which makes sense. Green Devotions plays a lot of Mana Dorks, so that's kind of the reason for the resurgence in Green Devotion. So that is what the metagame looks like. We're not going to take a look at Grill Prowess, but we are going to show some interesting and spicy decks. And the first one here I have for you is from Medvedev in 24th place. Now, upon first glance, this may look like your traditional Azorius Control deck, which, to be fair, it kind of is, right? You're playing Emperors and Marches and a bunch of counter spells and consults. But what I wanted to point out about this deck list, and what's very, very different from other Azorius Control decks, is the presence of 4 copies of Wan Shi Tong Librarian. This card has gotten a lot of press for its playability in Modern, because in that format where fetch lands exist, people tend to shuffle a lot more and search their library. In Pioneer and Standard, it's kind of difficult to find a people that search their library with the regularity that you would want to play this card. But what if you can force them to search with Demolition Field and Field of Ruin? So that is kind of what the plan is here. The one thing I wanted to shout out here is Unwind, which is 3 mana counter on non-creature spell, untap 3 lands. Very, very cool with things like Field of Ruin and Wan Shi Tong, where you can counter their spell, untap the 3 lands that you paid to use the Unwind, and then with those 3 lands, activate Field or play a Wan Shi Tong. So it kind of gives you the ability to do multiple things, which very, very important when you're playing something like Wan Shi Tong. You want to try and field them every single turn to make sure you can get that consistent value of Wan Shi Tong. So, yeah, I'm not necessarily sure if this is what blue-white control is going to look like moving forward, but just figured I would give you an idea of what the potential of Wan Shi Tong could be in a format like Pioneer. Next up here from 7th Prophet in 20th place. That damn airship, man, it is everywhere. So Phoenix Fleet Airship, again, card that makes a copy of itself if you've sacrificed a permanent, which is a little bit more difficult to do in a format like Pioneer, but it turns out there is an entire deck called Sacrifice that wants to sacrifice permanents. Witch's Oven, Deadly Dispute, Blood Tithe Harvester, Oni Cult Anvil, plenty of ways to sacrifice permanents to turn on the airship. And more importantly, Shambling Ghast. This is a card that I kind of experimented a little bit with the airship in Standard. Not Shambling Ghast, but the version that's legal, the Greedy Freebooter. It's effectively the same card. But these creatures that when it dies, you make a treasure token. Because if you can make a treasure on turn 2, then you can go turn 3, cast the airship with the treasure. Guess what? The treasure has been sacrificed to cast the airship. So now you get a second airship on turn 3. But yeah, other than that, just kind of like your typical sacrifice fare. Again, Mayhem Devils, Scavenger's Talons to kind of mill yourself for a bunch. This also gives you more food whenever a creature dies. The food can then be sacrificed to get back the familiar, etc., etc. The Oni Cult Anvil's very powerful at sacrificing artifacts to turn on the ship. And yeah, pretty much just the rest of this deck looks like your normal Rakdos sacrifice deck, but really wanted to highlight those airships because I really do think this card has a lot of potential in multiple different formats and would not be surprised to see it show up in Standard as well. Well, if you want to blow up lands, boy, do I have the deck for you. VFS in 27th place. Looking at when I first loaded up this deck list, I knew it had a lot of like Stone Rain, Field of Ruin type effects, but I didn't really truly realize how many we had that were legal in Pioneer. So Krenko's Buzz Crusher, Magmatic Hellkite, Cleansing Wildfire, Price of Freedom, new card alert, Field of Ruin, and Demolition Field. So there's 24 ways that basically all say the same thing. When they destroy a land, they search for a basic. There's some subtle differences, but for the most part, they're all basically the same. But this is sort of enabled by the new card here, Price of Freedom, right? 2 mana, destroy an artifact or land that opponent controls. They get a basic, and then you draw a card, which is, for all intents and purposes, another copy of Wildfire. It is slightly better because the Price of Freedom can actually hit artifacts too. So if they're playing an annoying artifact, you can get rid of that with Price of Freedom. But yeah, this is sort of the redundancy that you need to play a deck like this, where you have these two, again, Hellkite and Buzzcrusher, and then Field and the 8 fields, combined with Goblin Dark Dwellers, so you can cast your Wildfires and Prices again. Win conditions, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Chandra. You got to play at least one expensive Planeswalker in the big red deck. So removal spells with a Braid and Flowstone, pile of Sweepers, some Dens, and then the cool thing here is Sunken Citadel, enabling both field and field, Demolition and Field of Ruin, to give you a little bit more mana early to activate the fields. So cool looking deck list if you're into blowing up lands. This is the one for you. And the last deck we're going to take a look at in Pioneer is from Claudio. Claudio again. And what we have here in 28th place is a deck that is near and dear to my heart, Jeskai Ascendancy. This is one of my favorite cards to play with of all time. I played it a lot when it was legal in Standard. When Pioneer first started, I tried to play this card. I am obsessed with Jeskai Ascendancy. And guess what? Badger Molcub makes a creature that taps for mana, which is very good with Jeskai Ascendancy. What's really cool about the Badger Molcub, and a big problem with Ascendancy decks in the past, is your other mana dorks, I say in air quotes mana dorks, were stuff like Llanowar Elf, Elvish Mystic. Those things only make green mana. But when you're going off with Ascendancy and you're trying to chain a bunch of cantrips, you don't really have a use for green mana. You need your creature to produce blue mana so you can keep casting your cantrips, untapping your creature, and then that allows you to keep going. But what's nice about Badger Mole is you can just put this on any dual land. So for example, you can put it on, I don't know, a blue-red land, and now you have a blue-red mana dork that can cast Consider or Fiery Impulse. So the ability to turn any of your dual lands into a mana creature for the Jeskai Ascendancy is extremely important. So I've seen a Badger Mole Cub in a lot of places, but this might be my favorite place that I've seen it in, and I'm going to have to give this deck a spin. I just absolutely cannot. I can't see a Jeskai Ascendancy and not at least give it a shot. All right, so that's going to do it for Pioneer. Let us go ahead and switch over to the final format of the episode, Standard. Didn't we ban the Izzet cards? So this is what the metagame is looking like with the first week of Avatar Standard. Now, 6 challenges, one of them was a showcase, 4 of them won by this Izzet Draws deck. We're not going to take a look at it. If for people who haven't seen it, it's basically just all of the blue-red draw cards that you remember from that you fondly remember from VV Standard, combined with Tiger Seal and a couple of the new cards. So 4 challenges won by that deck, 1 by Mono Red Leyline, and 1 by Simic Aggro. Now, as far as the metagame is concerned, there is a lot of Izzet and a lot of Dimir. As you can see, 15.6% Izzet draws, 15.1% Dimir midrange. But there is a lot of variation in terms of what everybody else is doing, right? Jeskai Control 5%, Simic Aggro at about 10%, Prowess 3.6%, Leyline 6.3%, Mono Red Aggro still showing up 5.2%. And what's funny is you can kind of tell on the graph where the new decks start, because every deck before Izzet Draws was basically already here. And all of these other decks are brand new to the chart because they didn't exist without Avatar, right? So if you kind of look at that, basically 2/3 of the metagame was decks that were legal before Avatar. Maybe it's a little bit more than that. And then again, the rest of this chart, all of these decks are brand new. 5-color Allies, Appa Combo, Boros Ascension, Azorius Glyph, which some people played but didn't really exist. Yeah, a lot of new decks. There's a ton to look at. There was, again, so many different deck lists from all the challenges this weekend. There's a lot to look at, but we can't look at everything. We are going to take a look at one extra deck during the segment today because there's just too much to go over, but I'm sure with week to week, we'll be going over more. But yeah, this is what the metagame looks like. Let's look at those deck lists now, because I know that's why you're all here. And one of those new archetypes that Avatar allows us to start playing here is the Allies deck. This particular list from user Maven in 7th place is not the true 5-color deck. If you look at the sideboard, there's no red cards. So this is the 4-color version that's been a little bit more popular. There's no red for wartime protesters, but every other color is represented here. Now, for people who have not seen the Allies deck, every single non-land card in this deck is from Avatar. So you have your 1-drops. This is sort of like a protection. This is effectively a 1-mana 3/2 or a 2/2. I haven't actually seen Gran in a lot of these lists because you usually associate Gran with lessons, and it's kind of strange to see Gran in a deck that has 36 creatures and no non-creature spells, but it's mostly here just to loot, right? Where you can still loot whenever Gran becomes tap, draw, discard, even if you don't have any non-creatures. And that might be a good idea because the other 1-drops that you can play in Allies specifically, they're not very good. This one is basically Athalia's Lieutenant, where it puts a counter on all of your allies, and then it grows whenever you play more allies. You have the Mana Dork with Divide Guide, reinforcements for 2 bodies, Voyager for a bunch of card draw. This one, whenever you basically like a Halia type thing, whenever artifact or whenever this creature or another ally enters, gain a life. If it's the second time, draw a card. And then you have some removal with Aang, Katara to double up your triggers. Literally every single card in this deck is an ally, which is very powerful because you have a lot of synergies with allies like Lieutenant, the Voyager, and then Katara to double up all the triggers. So this is kind of what the Allies deck is looking like. Again, some people do play the wartime protesters over the Aangs and the Hakodas, but basically everything else is kind of set in stone. The Grans, sometimes those are different 1-drops, but for the most part, this is kind of what the Allies deck is looking like, which is sort of all made possible by, I mean, look at how many rainbow lands. Cavern, Tea Shop, Secluded Courtyard, and Starting Town. So you can kind of do whatever you want. And that's Allies. Another deck that was not possible last week, but we have made possible with the Avatar cards is Bant Appa combo. This particular list is coming from Amaron Sneak in 17th place. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the exact same list that streamer Meow was playing on their stream, who they went on an unbelievable run with this particular deck list. Something like, I don't know, 32-3 or something. I lost track. But what's going on here is the mana generation of Llanowar Elf and Gene Pollinator. These are both 1 mana creatures combined with Badger Mole Cub. That's sort of forms the backbone and the foundation of how much mana you can actually generate. You have Bramble Familiar, which is a mana dork, but it also serves another purpose here, where if you play Bramble Familiar and then you airbend your own Bramble Familiar, you can then cast the spell half of this, normally a 7-mana spell, for 2 mana because you've airbended your familiar. For people who have not seen the combo, I will kind of go over it for you. So it's Doc Orlock, Aang, Swift Savior, and Appa Steadfast Guardian. Doc discounts all of your spells from exile by 2. Aang can airbend 1 creature or spell, and then Appa airbends any number of target non-land permanents you control. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, make a 1/1. So basically the combo is you have Doc in play, you Appa to airbend your Aang, right? Remember, your Aang costs 0, so you play Aang for 0, airbend your Appa, you play Appa for 0, airbend your Aang. So you can do that an infinite number of times, and what the combo is, because Appa has this line of text that says whenever you cast a spell from exile, you make a 1/1 ally. So you make Infinite Allies token at instant speed nonetheless, because both of these have flash. You have some other ways to find the combo with Aang at the Crossroads and Nature's Rhythm. Nature's Rhythm, very powerful because you have a boatload of mana generation with the 1-drop mana dorks and Badger Mole Cub. So there's a lot to like about this deck. I don't think this deck is in its final form yet, but some combination of Doc, Aang, Appa, mana dorks, this is definitely going to be a deck in Standard for quite some time. And the key will be to unlock the true potential is finding that final shell. But the combo itself is very strong, and I will say I've been very impressed by this deck. So there was actually one more tournament that took place this weekend that I didn't necessarily put on the results, but there was a tournament that happened in Japan over the weekend. I believe it was called, I don't remember the title of the tournament, like something Last Avatar God or something. But basically, TLDR, it was a very large Standard tournament, I think about 340 players. And this particular deck list, which this list is from a Magic Online challenge, but it was copy-pasted of the deck list from the Japanese tournament from Bodado in 7th place here. So this particular list, it's sort of Dimir Bounce, right? That's what's going on here. Fear of Isolation, Boomerang Basics, a new card from Avatar, to kind of function as a blue pixie, where you can use this to bounce your own permanents, and then it returns anything, but if you controlled the permanent, you get to draw a card. Which means that if you're bouncing your own Storm Chaser's Talents, or Grim Baubles, or Nowhere to Runs, you can cycle all of those. Tiny Bones joins up as well. So you draw cards every time you bounce one of your own things with Boomerang Basics. It also creates this loop where Pixie does not with Storm Chaser's Talent, where similar to what you used to do with This Town Ain't Big Enough, you can bounce the talent, replay the talent, level up, get back Boomerang, Boomerang, bounce the talent, replay talent, level up, get back Boomerang. I'm sure you're really excited to hear that. But the new card here, besides Boomerang, that I wanted to highlight was the Legend of Kuruk, which is 2 blue. It's a saga. First 2 chapters, you scry, then draw, and then it flips into a 4/3 that whenever you play a spell, you make a 1/1, and you can waterbend 20 to take an extra turn. But why this card is so powerful is you can pick it up. I mean, I played a few games with this deck the other day, which are probably going to be going up on the YouTube channel very shortly. Never really ran into a situation where I wanted to bounce this, but it is possible. But more so, it's sort of an end game where when you flip this thing, it actually, Waterbend 20 sounds like a lot, but it sort of fulfills itself because you make more tokens. It actually came up quite a bit for me when I played this card. And then you have this kind of draw engine with Entity Tracker, where every time you play an enchantment, you draw a card. So talents that you're bouncing with boomerangs can draw more cards. Same thing with Tiny Bones. Fear of Isolation, bounce an enchantment, that'll be an extra 2 cards. One off the fear, one off the enchantment. So yeah, I'm not necessarily sure if this is better than Pixie, but the one thing that I realized is the mana base is a lot better. Turns out when you're playing 2 colors as opposed to 3, mana becomes a lot better. So this is one that I definitely want to keep my eye on. Next deck I want to take a look at here is from Turn 1 Tinker in 5th place, maybe a vintage user there. This deck, upon first glance, seems very similar to a Collector's Cage deck, where you have a lot of mana dorks, you have ways to make extra bodies, you have some 2-drops, you have some expensive cards, but where are the Collector's Cages? Well, they're not here. That's the TLDR. And what's going on is we're basically just kind of like a Celestia aggro deck, where you're taking advantage of having this very, very powerful mana acceleration engine with Pollinator, Elf, and Badger Mole. But instead of playing something like Collector's Cage or very expensive cards, you're just playing some more 3s and 4-drops. You can use the extra mana to play something like a Virtue of Loyalty, and that's kind of what's nice about this, where Virtue, just a powerful card, you're casting it for 2 mana, you don't necessarily need to ramp super hard to get to 5, but if you have a Badger Mole, Cub, Gene Pollinator, Elf draw, then you're going to have a lot of extra mana. You can also use your extra mana to level up talents. You have a Fountain Port in here, some Restless Prairies. So you don't, kind of the idea here is you don't have to go super over the top with Badger Mole. You can just play a couple more 4s. The power, like the combination of Gene, Elf, Badger Mole, and Ouroboros is such a powerful set of cards that you can kind of just play normal cards around them. And that's exactly what's happening here. So there's a ton of different configurations to try out with Badger Mole Cub. Not sure if this one is going to be the best one, but this looks like a very, very cohesive and well-built deck. And I just wanted to give a shout out to T1 Tinker. All right, I know this episode's been going a bit longer than usual, so I promise this will be the last deck list. There's too much good stuff with Avatar to take a look at. Now, this list is coming to you from Killa_SUV, winner of the Modern Pro Tour recently. And this list, I believe, is also one that came from one of the Japanese tournament. And what's going on here is you're basically kind of like blue-white, flash, but also not flash because you have Voice of Victory. But you have the combination of Aang and Aven Interrupter to tempo out opponents with stuff like Flood Pits Drowner, and then Enduring Curiosity. The big thing that I wanted to highlight here, the synergy between Enduring Curiosity and Voice of Victory is massive. Like getting 2 tokens off Voice to then hit with Curiosity, very, very powerful. And again, you have a lot of things you can do at instant speed for 3 mana. You have the Avens, the Aangs, but also Iceberg, which is kind of like a flash O-ring, paired with your counter spells and removal spells to always keep your opponent guessing. You have Avatar's Wrath if things get a little hairy, to kind of sweep up the battlefield, and also it means that your opponent can't cast spells from exile, so if they previously have something that was airbend or plotted, then they can't play those for an additional turn, which is kind of cool. One abandoned air temple. This deck is going kind of wide with sirens and voices and whatnot. So yeah, just a pretty clean looking sort of Azorius tempo deck that is sort of made possible because of Aang Swift Savior and the combination of sort of the 1-2 punch with Aang and Interrupter. Alrighty, my friends, we went a little bit long today. My recording shows a little over 40 minutes, so hopefully my editor can cut that down a little bit, but there's just so much to talk about with Avatar. I'm so excited about this set. I've been having an absolute blast. I really hope you guys are enjoying the content. We got some more standard to come, and we'll do this metagame thing next week, I guess. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, adios.